Flight attendant kicks man for wearing sneakers, not knowing. He's the hidden owner of the plane. Imagine the chaos that unfolds when a flight attendant makes a seemingly innocent mistake, asking the wrong person to vacate a first-class seat. But what if that passenger is not just any traveler, but the secret owner of the entire airline? Stay with us as we unravel how one small misstep can spiral into a dramatic clash for power, control, and a shocking truth that no one anticipated. Before we plunge into this gripping tale, we'd love to hear your predictions in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more thrilling updates. Stories: the flight appeared to be just another ordinary journey, or so it seemed at first glance. The passengers were nestled in their seats, the crew diligently preparing for takeoff. Among them sat a man casually dressed in sneakers, jeans, and a simple t-shirt. He blended in seamlessly with the crowd, nothing about him suggesting he was anything out of the ordinary. His face wore a calm expression, and his eyes wandered, lost in the comforting glow of his phone, occasionally flickering towards the window as the plane began its slow taxi down the runway. The flight attendants gracefully moved through the aisles, performing their duties with practiced ease. As the pre-flight routines unfolded, with drinks being served and seat belts being checked, everything seemed perfectly ordinary. But then Lauren, a flight attendant known for her meticulous nature and keen eye for detail, noticed him. She was always quick to identify what she considered improper behavior, fiercely enforcing the rules to ensure everything was just right in her section. Her gaze sharpened as she scrutinized the man in his sneakers, seated in first class. There was something about him that felt off, an unsettling dissonance. His casual attire clashed with the elegance of the surroundings, leaving her with an inexplicable sense of unease. In this exclusive section, Lauren made her way forward, her heels echoing with a sharp click against the aisle floor. She approached his seat, her expression a blend of politeness and determination, her gaze sweeping over his sneakers as if they had committed a grave offense. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice laced with a subtle tension. "I'm afraid I must ask you to move. Sneakers aren't permitted in first class. It's part of the dress code." The man looked up, his expression a mix of surprise and intrigue at the sudden interruption. Yet rather than responding with anger or frustration, he maintained a serene demeanor. He cast a calm glance at Lauren, then back at the seat in front of him, as if he were carefully processing her words. With a quiet nod, he replied, "I understand." But beneath that tranquil exterior, he was anything but unshaken. There was an undeniable quality to his calmness that deepened Lauren's conviction that he didn't truly belong there. Without uttering another word, Lauren gestured for him to gather his belongings, while the other passengers around them began to take notice. Some passengers glanced over with curiosity at the unfolding interaction, while others feigned disinterest, lost in their own thoughts. But Lauren didn't mind the attention. She was standing up for what she believed was right. After all, rules were rules. As the man slowly rose, gathering his bag and a small item from the seat pocket, a wave of satisfaction washed over her. She watched intently as he made his way toward the back of the plane, accompanied by another crew member. In that moment, the entire cabin seemed to hold its breath, the whispers growing louder, charged with anticipation as people reacted to the scene unfolding before them. Began to discuss the shocking scene they had just witnessed. Claire, seated in the front row, remained silent, her lips pressed into a tight line. She didn't engage with anyone around her, but her mind was a whirlwind of questions. Why hadn't he fought back? Why was he so eerily calm? It felt as if he had anticipated this moment. As the man made his way to the back of the plane, his composure was unshakable. He showed no anger, no distress, just an unsettling indifference. The passengers who had been observing couldn't tear their eyes away, some out of disbelief, others from sheer fascination. Confusion swirled around others, driven by curiosity, yet there was an undeniable calmness about him, as if he viewed this moment as just another bump in the road, a mere blip for someone accustomed to the unexpected. The flight attendants, having witnessed the entire scene unfold, exchanged awkward glances, their uncertainty palpable as they pondered their next steps. But Lauren, in that moment, felt a surge of pride swell within her. She had done what was expected, ensuring that the rules were upheld. In her mind, she had just safeguarded the dignity of the first-class section. However, as she turned her gaze back to where the man had vanished, she watched him fade into the distance, leaving a lingering sense of intrigue behind. Economy section. The unsettling feeling in her gut lingered, refusing to fade away. There was an undeniable weight to this entire situation that gnawed at her. As minutes ticked by and the flight ascended without a hitch, passengers seemed at ease, and the crew fell back into their routine. Yet an invisible thread of tension wove through the cabin, thick and suffocating. Despite Lauren's efforts to focus on her duties, a sense of foreboding clung to her, whispering that something was amiss. She moved through the aisles, serving drinks and snacks, but her thoughts were a restless storm, swirling with unease. As Lauren returned her gaze to that man, his calm demeanor, his unsettling lack of resistance, and the quiet authority he exuded sent a shiver down her spine. She desperately tried to shake off the feeling, forcing herself to concentrate on the flight, but the unease clung to her, gnawing at her thoughts. Meanwhile, Claire, seated just a few rows away in first class, observed the unfolding scene in silence. She had witnessed others become upset when asked to move, but this man's reaction was strikingly different. There was something deeply unsettling about the way he managed the situation, and Claire couldn't shake the feeling. It lingered in her mind, haunting her. Although she couldn't quite grasp the reason, Claire felt a jolt of unease when Lauren walked by again, her expression more strained than usual. She managed a quick forced smile and offered a polite nod as Lauren passed down the aisle. But a nagging feeling lingered in Claire's mind. It was as if Lauren was concealing something far more complicated than her demeanor suggested. The man was still vivid in her thoughts, and Claire couldn't shake the unsettling notion that this was merely the beginning of something much more significant. As the flight went on, Lauren's furtive glances back only deepened Claire's concern. In the economy section, where the man had quietly taken his seat, she had managed to convince herself that her actions were justified, that she was merely adhering to the rules. Yet a small, persistent doubt gnawed at her mind, an unsettling feeling that there was something deeper at play than she had first realized. Each time she walked past the back of the plane, her gaze would involuntarily dart to where he sat, exuding an unsettling calmness, almost too calm. Meanwhile, the passengers in the economy section seemed to have settled into their familiar flight routines, some engrossed in their reading. While others were engrossed in their movies, an unspoken tension hung heavily in the air. A few of the more perceptive souls stole glances at the man, only to quickly avert their eyes as if they sensed something familiar, yet elusive. The atmosphere was thick with an insatiable curiosity. Lauren, however, was lost in her own world. She diligently attended to the first-class passengers, offering drinks and engaging in light conversation, but her thoughts were elsewhere. The more she pondered, the more her gut twisted with the realization that she might have made a grave mistake. She had encountered countless passengers, yet this one felt different. Yet there was an unmistakable strangeness in the way the man had managed everything. He hadn't fought, hadn't argued, hadn't even raised his voice. That eerie calmness, that unsettling stillness in his gaze sent shivers down her spine. At one point, Lauren found herself wandering toward the galley, her hands mechanically preparing more refreshments, while her mind drifted far away. It was in that moment that she caught snippets of a hushed conversation between two crew members, James and Megan. "Did you see the guy in first class?" Megan whispered, her voice barely above a murmur, as if afraid of drawing attention. "Attention!" James glanced around, lowering his voice as he spoke. "Yeah, what's up with him?" He didn't seem like the usual first-class type. Lauren stiffened at his words, a familiar irritation rising within her. "What's that supposed to mean?" She interjected sharply, a sting of regret washing over her for the bite in her tone. James looked at her, shrugging, as if he could sense her unease. It was just that he didn't seem to fit in. Not really. I mean, he was wearing sneakers. Lauren bit her lip, but her thoughts were already racing. "Racing," she whispered. "I just thought he was out of place." He wasn't dressed appropriately for first class, plain and simple. Megan offered her a sympathetic glance. "It's no big deal, Lauren, but you might want to be careful with assumptions." We don't always know who people truly are. Lauren nodded, attempting to shake off the unease that had settled heavily in her chest. Yet as the conversation drifted on, she couldn't escape the nagging feeling that she was overlooking something significant. Her thoughts kept circling back to the man. She had made a judgment based solely on appearances, but the weight of that decision lingered in her mind. The more she pondered, the more it dawned on her that perhaps, just perhaps, her choice hadn't been completely just back in first class. Claire's mind lingered on the earlier moments. She had caught the hushed murmurs from the other passengers, noticed the furtive glances exchanged, and felt the palpable tension hanging in the air. It was as if there was a deeper story woven into this situation, far beyond a mere seating mix-up. Claire couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that the man was not just an ordinary traveler. There was something about his quiet confidence that had ensnared her curiosity, leaving her to wonder endlessly. As the flight continued, a heavy weight settled on Lauren's heart. What if this was more than just an awkward moment for the crew? A sense of foreboding crept in, suggesting there might be a deeper reason behind everything that had just transpired. Despite her best efforts to focus on her duties, her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, replaying the unsettling events over and over. She had encountered countless passengers throughout her career, yet something about this man's demeanor struck a chord of unease within her. His calm reaction to the request to move, paired with that unsettling look in his eyes, left her feeling profoundly unsettled. The thought that she might have misjudged him, that she could have made a monumental mistake, was beginning to weigh heavily on her mind. Lauren couldn't shake the nagging feeling that she had been far too hasty in her judgment. As a flight attendant, her duty was to ensure a pleasant experience for everyone, yet now she found herself questioning whether she had crossed a line. With a mix of anxiety and determination, she resolved to discreetly check the man's seat assignment once more. She made her way to the back of the plane, feigning a routine check on the passengers, but her eyes were intently scanning the seat numbers, her heart racing with uncertainty. Her stomach plummeted when she saw that his ticket had indeed confirmed his first-class seat. The unease in her chest constricted painfully. How could she have been so certain? Why had she assumed he didn't belong? Meanwhile, in the economy section, the man sat composed, as if nothing was amiss. His head was slightly tilted back, gazing at the overhead compartments, lost in thought. His relaxed posture exuded a quiet authority that deepened Lauren's discomfort. She knew she had to. She hesitated to approach the captain or a senior crew member, reluctant to voice her nagging doubts. Deep down, she yearned to cling to the belief that her choices were sound, even as uncertainty gnawed at her insides. The flight sailed on without a hitch, yet Lauren found herself adrift in a sea of distraction. As she navigated the aisles, serving drinks and checking on passengers, her thoughts spiraled elsewhere. A tightening tension gripped her chest, making it nearly impossible to focus on her duties. Each time she passed the man, she stole a quick glance, only to be met with an unsettling silence that deepened her unease. Still calm, still indifferent to the chaos she had unleashed, Claire, who had been quietly observing from the first-class section, felt a growing sense of unease. Throughout the flight, she had remained silent, but her mind was racing with thoughts of the man. His behavior was unnervingly composed, far too deliberate for someone merely passing through. A nagging curiosity gnawed at her, especially as she watched Lauren's demeanor grow increasingly stiff and anxious. It was evident that something had shifted in the air, a tension that was impossible to ignore. Between them, Claire's instincts screamed that this was no mere incident. It was the dawn of something far more significant. As the flight soared steadily through the vast sky, Lauren's anxiety intensified with each passing moment. She had always taken pride in her professionalism, in her ability to navigate even the most challenging situations with grace. But this was unlike anything she had faced before. Each time she walked past the economy section, her gaze would inevitably be drawn to the man, so eerily calm, so unnervingly still, that it sent shivers down her spine. That persistent feeling of dread gnawed at her, a relentless whisper that something was amiss. Was a moment filled with an unsettling absence that Lauren couldn't shake off. The other passengers had begun to pick up on the strange atmosphere, whispers of the incident weaving through the air like a haunting melody. Those who had witnessed the event exchanged furtive glances, their expressions a mix of curiosity and doubt, some silently questioning if Lauren had erred in her actions. Yet no one dared to confront her directly, which only deepened her sense of unease. As Lauren walked down the aisle once more, this time with a heavy heart, her gaze drifted toward the back where the man sat, an invisible thread of tension binding them together despite his silence. The passengers surrounding him seemed to instinctively steer clear, amplifying the weight of the moment. As Lauren made eye contact with him, a wave of unease washed over her, as if they both sensed the tension that could spiral out of control. She cast a nervous glance at the seat numbers while passing by, her heart racing when she noticed he was still in the seat she had insisted he leave. A sharp pang of guilt pierced her, but she quickly buried it deep within. Her decision was resolute, or so she tried to convince herself. Yet just then, her gaze fell upon something that made her blood run cold. The flight manifest, which she had clutched tightly all day, was now wide open on her tablet. Lauren. She had been scanning the list of first-class passengers, desperately searching for anyone who might have been seated incorrectly, when her gaze suddenly landed on his name. It felt like a punch to the gut. The man whose presence had stirred so much uncertainty within her was indeed the rightful passenger in his seat. His ticket was valid. He was meant to be in first class. Lauren's heart plummeted as the crushing weight of her mistake settled in. How had she overlooked this crucial detail? The realization hit her like a tidal wave. She had judged him solely by his sneakers. With a seemingly casual appearance, she had assumed he didn't belong. But now as she looked at the manifest, the weight of her mistake crashed down on her like a tidal wave. A deep sense of embarrassment flooded her, leaving her breathless. How could she have overlooked this? How could she have made such a hasty judgment? Her hands quivered slightly as she lowered the tablet, desperately trying to regain her composure. She stole a quick glance back at the man, who remained seated, calm and unbothered, as if nothing had changed. Yet for Lauren, everything had shifted in an instant. What had begun, a simple mistake, had now spiraled into something far beyond her wildest imagination. And as she stood there, paralyzed in the aisle, an unsettling feeling gnawed at her. There was something deeper at play, a hidden layer she had yet to uncover. She could only pray that it wasn't too late to mend the situation. Lauren's mind raced, desperately trying to piece together the chaos of what had just unfolded. The weight of her error crashed down on her with every fleeting second, a harsh reminder of her impulsive judgment of the man, clouded by her own misperceptions regarding his appearance. But now a deeper understanding washed over her. This man was not just an ordinary passenger. He belonged there, just as much as anyone else. The more she pondered this realization, the more she felt a wave of self-doubt crash over her. How could she have been so oblivious to the truth? In the economy section, he remained composed, seemingly untouched by the chaos swirling around him. His tranquil, almost peaceful presence stood in stark contrast to Lauren's escalating unease. He hadn't flinched when she asked him to move, nor had he shown any sign of resistance, leaving her grappling with her own turmoil. As she guided him down the aisle, to anyone else he might have appeared just like an ordinary traveler caught in a twist of fate. But Lauren couldn't shake the nagging sensation that something crucial had slipped through her fingers. There was an unsettling aura surrounding him, a quiet authority that felt poised to unveil itself as the flight wore on. Lauren's mind spiraled with thoughts, each one more consuming than the last. She struggled to concentrate on her duties, but it felt nearly impossible. Each time she brushed past him, her stomach knotted with a mix of anxiety and intrigue. It felt as if he was acutely aware of the mistakes she had made, and that awareness hung heavily in the air. His gaze remained fixed on her, devoid of any anger or frustration, yet it radiated a peculiar, knowing calmness, as if he were biding his time, waiting for the perfect moment to act. Meanwhile, Claire, still seated in first class, couldn't tear her eyes away from the unfolding drama. Her interest grew with each passing moment as she observed the tension between Lauren and the man. Something about it unsettled her deeply. Much like Lauren, she found herself unable to articulate the source of her unease. It was precisely what it appeared to be, yet deep down, Claire's instincts whispered that there was something deeper lurking beneath the surface. Her intuition had seldom failed her, and an unsettling feeling gnawed at her, suggesting that the man was far from an ordinary passenger. As she kept her gaze fixed, Claire couldn't help but notice the shift in Lauren's demeanor. Her once unwavering confidence was faltering. She no longer walked with the same assurance, her movements now stiff and mechanical, as if she bore the burden of an ungraspable truth. The flight attendants continued their routines, but it was painfully evident that Lauren's error had cast a shadow over the atmosphere. As Claire's composure began to unravel, a surge of curiosity washed over her. Who was this enigmatic man, and what ties did he have to this seemingly mundane flight? The answer was elusive, shrouded in mystery. Just as Lauren started to grasp the enormity of her misstep, the man, calm yet intense, with a gaze that seemed to pierce through her very soul, was poised to make a move that would alter the course of everything. Not just for Lauren, but for every soul aboard. The flight continued on, seemingly uneventful, but Lauren's mind was a tempest, unable to find peace amidst the chaos of her thoughts. Every time she walked past the man in the back of the plane, an unsettling feeling gnawed at her insides. She desperately tried to shake it off, but it clung to her like an unwelcome shadow. The haunting realization that she had made a mistake, wrongfully moving someone from a first-class seat, looped endlessly in her mind. It was a seemingly simple error, yet it loomed over her, threatening to spiral into something far more significant. Lauren felt the weight of it pressing down on her, and despite her efforts to distract herself with small tasks, refilling drinks, checking on passengers, maintaining a facade, she couldn't escape the growing anxiety that enveloped her. Her heart felt heavy every time she caught sight of the man sitting so composed in the economy section. A knot twisted in her stomach. His calm demeanor had thrown her off from the very start. He hadn't raised his voice or caused a scene, yet his quiet confidence unsettled her in a way she couldn't quite put into words. It was as if he held secrets she could never grasp, and the more she pondered, the more she feared she might never truly understand him. Meanwhile, Claire, still perched in first class, couldn't help but keep a watchful eye on the unfolding situation, her curiosity about the enigmatic man only growing stronger. There was an unsettling quality to the way he managed the situation, something that just didn't sit right. Most passengers would have been furious, distraught, or at the very least vocal about the injustice of being shuffled from a first-class seat. But not him. He exuded an eerie calmness, a collected demeanor that seemed entirely untouched by the chaos around him. Claire's instincts screamed that there was a deeper truth lurking beneath the surface, one that Lauren or anyone else on board was oblivious to. Her thoughts were abruptly shattered as she caught sight of Lauren once more making her way down the aisle. But this time, there was a palpable shift in her demeanor. Felt like a whirlwind. Her steps were quicker, more erratic. She was no longer the confident, composed flight attendant who had greeted the passengers at the start of the journey. Her anxious glances back toward the man in the economy section didn't escape Claire's notice. She could feel that something was amiss. Claire's focus shifted to the man, who remained unchanged, lost in his own thoughts. His calm demeanor only highlighted Lauren's growing agitation. Claire resolved to take a more subtle approach. She wasn't one to leap into action without understanding the full picture. To conclusions, but deep down, her instincts screamed that this situation was anything but ordinary. She observed Lauren retreating toward the galley, her voice barely a whisper as she spoke to one of the other flight attendants. Claire strained to catch the words, but Lauren's body language spoke volumes. It was clear that something had changed. The confident flight attendant was now visibly shaken, as if an unseen force was unsettling her. As the flight dragged on, the palpable tension between Lauren and the man intensified, even though he remained silent, his quiet presence radiating an unsettling energy. His unwavering calmness cast a palpable tension that enveloped everyone around him. The crew, the passengers, and even Claire couldn't shake off the feeling. They all sensed it. This man was no mere traveler. He exuded a quiet authority that demanded respect without uttering a single word. The moment when his true identity would be revealed loomed closer, and Lauren's heart raced in her chest as she navigated through the cabin, desperately trying to uphold her usual professional facade. Yet with each step, the weight of the situation pressed down on her, making her feel as if she were trudging through thick mud. The last moments were filled with an overwhelming sense of unease that was becoming unbearable. She had performed her duties countless times before, but this time felt achingly different. Her mind was consumed by thoughts of the man, his calmness, his stillness, like a predator watching its prey, patiently waiting for something to unfold. Each time she passed him, a shiver ran down her spine, as if his gaze pierced through her, knowing the secret she was desperately trying to suppress. It was in the tense silence that the captain's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing a smooth ride and urging passengers to sit back and relax. Lauren, she barely registered the announcement, her thoughts swirling in a different realm. Just as she was about to walk down the aisle again, a fellow crew member, James, gently pulled her aside. His expression was grave, and he seemed to feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. "Lauren, are you okay?" James asked, his voice laced with concern. "You've been acting off all flight." Lauren forced a tight smile, attempting to dismiss his worry. "I'm fine," she replied, but her voice trembled with uncertainty. "Just, one of those days." James appeared to be filled with doubt. "It's about that guy, isn't it?" Lauren's breath caught in her throat, and she shot him a piercing glance. "What do you mean?" James lowered his voice, casting furtive glances around, as if to ensure their conversation remained private. "I saw you walk by earlier. You don't usually second-guess yourself. What's going on with him?" Lauren swallowed hard, reluctant to voice her uncertainty, especially not to a colleague. I don't know," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something feels off. I moved him from first class, and I've been thinking maybe I shouldn't have." James raised an eyebrow, sensing the weight of her unease. Eyebrow raised, she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You didn't check the manifest?" Her cheeks burned with embarrassment as she realized the hasty judgment she had made, dismissing him simply because of his sneakers and laid-back look. She hadn't taken the time to verify his seat assignment until it was far too late, and now she found herself entangled in a situation that could spiral out of control. "I thought he was out of place," Lauren admitted, her voice trembling, barely a whisper. "But now, I'm not so sure. What if I made a colossal mistake?" James's expression turned grave. "Lauren, you have to be careful. You know that. First class isn't merely a seat. It's a realm defined by the souls who occupy it, the individuals who are granted access. The people we serve often wear masks, and they aren't always who they seem." Lauren's stomach plummeted as she absorbed the weight of James's unspoken warning. What if she had made a grave mistake, ejecting the wrong person from the plane? What if this was not just an ordinary passenger, but someone of immense significance? The chilling thought sent a shiver racing down her spine. Almost instinctively, Lauren's gaze drifted to the back of the plane, where the man remained seated, utterly still, seemingly untouched by the chaos surrounding him. Unfolded before her, and yet there was something in his demeanor that whispered to Lauren he was fully aware of the events transpiring. Just then, she caught sight of him pulling out his phone, his fingers dancing across the screen with a swift yet deliberate calmness. For a fleeting moment, their eyes locked, and a shiver coursed through her. His gaze was unwavering, devoid of malice, but it carried an unsettling depth of understanding, as if he held secrets she could only dream of. Lauren quickly averted her gaze, her heart racing. What was he up to? Who was he really? The feeling clung to her, refusing to let go. That this was far from over, and whatever unfolded next was beyond her grasp. The realization crashed over her like a tidal wave, more overwhelming than she had anticipated. This was no mere seating error. It was on the brink of evolving into something monumental. As the man remained seated, utterly still, Lauren's anxiety spiraled deeper. She couldn't shake the memory of their brief yet electric exchange of glances. His calm gaze felt almost prophetic, as if he comprehended the weight of her choices more profoundly than she did. She struggled to concentrate on her responsibilities, but her thoughts kept drifting away. Drifting back to him, She couldn't shake the question. Who was he really? Why had he reacted so differently from all the other passengers who'd been asked to move? The more she pondered, the more her unease morphed into a chilling certainty that she had made a grave mistake. The air was thick with tension, and the other passengers seemed to feel it too. Some cast furtive glances at Lauren, while others eyed the man with a mix of curiosity and fear. Whispers swirled around them, growing louder, yet no one had the courage to speak out. Lauren's face burned under the weight of their scrutiny. She had always been so confident in her choices, but now everything felt precarious, as if the ground beneath her was crumbling away. Claire, still nestled in her first-class seat, watched the scene unfold from afar, her heart heavy with concern. She had been intently observing Lauren's behavior ever since the unsettling incident with the man began. Something felt profoundly off to her. The flight attendant's interactions were far too abrupt, too charged with tension. The air in the cabin was thick with discomfort, a palpable ripple that she could sense. But unlike Lauren, Claire possessed the clarity to look beyond the surface. She had witnessed enough to understand that this was not merely a dispute over seating. There was a deeper story lurking in the shadows. As Lauren passed by her seat, Claire's intuition screamed that something significant was at play. Once more she lifted her gaze and met Claire's eyes for just a fleeting moment. Lauren faltered, her once assured stride now replaced by uncertainty. Claire could see it in her eyes. Lauren was clearly on edge, visibly rattled by something beyond her grasp. Trusting her instincts, Claire chose to act. She waited until Lauren had taken a few steps away, then quietly rose and made her way to the galley, where she had spotted the man earlier. Claire approached the back of the plane with deliberate slowness, careful to remain unnoticed. The man was still there, sitting there, his back straight, his gaze fixed on his phone. His serene demeanor amidst the swirling tension only deepened the enigma that surrounded him. Claire paused a few steps behind him, purposefully clearing her throat to make her presence known. He turned slowly, locking eyes with her, his expression betraying no hint of surprise. "Everything all right?" Claire inquired, her tone polite yet laced with curiosity. The man glanced up at her, his expression remaining a mystery. For a brief moment, silence enveloped them, thick with unspoken thoughts. Then, in a gentle yet unwavering voice, he responded, "Everything is perfectly fine, thank you." There was an undeniable quality in his voice that caused Claire to hesitate. He was not just another passenger. The calm confidence he exuded felt heavy with significance, far beyond what one would expect from a casual traveler. Claire smiled, giving a quick nod before settling back into her seat, her mind swirling with questions. This was no mere dress code violation. Something deeper was at play. As she sat down, her thoughts raced. Who was this enigmatic man? What had truly transpired between him and Lauren? It was evident that a much larger story was unfolding before her eyes. The unease that had gripped her earlier intensified, wrapping around her like a heavy fog. The tension in the air had transformed, and Claire felt it deep in her bones. She didn't yet know what fate awaited them, but one thing was crystal clear. The story was far from over, and the man's true role in this flight was on the brink of revelation. As the flight continued, time for Lauren became a relentless stretch of uncertainty. Hours blurred into one another as she moved through the cabin, checking on passengers and offering drinks. Yet her mind was ensnared in a relentless loop. The man's calm, unwavering presence haunted her thoughts, leaving her to wonder, what was it that stirred such unease within her? There was something about him that felt so crucial, and now she realized she had completely misjudged him. The weight of her mistake pressed down on her, and she was left to suffer in silence. It wasn't just the error that haunted her. It was the gnawing feeling that something significant was on the horizon, something that would lay bare the full magnitude of her miscalculation. The flight attendants had begun to notice Lauren's unsettling change in demeanor. Megan, who had been quietly observing from a distance, approached her with genuine concern. "You don't seem like yourself," she said, her voice laced with worry. Lauren attempted to muster a smile, but it faltered, revealing the turmoil within. "Came out weak. I'm fine. Just tired, I guess." Deep down, she was reluctant to confess that the guilt was gnawing at her insides. Megan shot her a skeptical glance, but chose to remain silent, instead drifting off to check on passengers in another part of the cabin. Lauren let out a heavy sigh of frustration, her gaze drifting once more toward the back of the plane. The man was still there, as composed as ever, seemingly untouched by the chaos that had just unfolded. His calmness was infuriating, amplifying her sense of helplessness. Lauren's heart raced. Lauren's heart raced as she caught sight of something unsettling. He had his phone out again, fingers flying across the screen with an urgency that sent chills down her spine. His eyes darted over the display, as if he were waiting for a response that could change everything. A heavy, unsettling feeling began to settle in the pit of her stomach. What was he up to? Was he reaching out to someone? Was he about to take things to a dangerous level? She glanced around, her anxiety mounting, desperate for someone to confide in. But the rest of the crew was lost in their own tasks. James, who had previously cautioned her about the risks of misjudging passengers, was nowhere in sight, leaving her feeling more isolated and uneasy than ever. The sense of isolation that enveloped Lauren was utterly suffocating. She was acutely aware of her mistake, yet all she could do was brace herself for the inevitable fallout. The man finally set his phone down, but the tension crackled between them, thick and palpable. As Lauren walked down the aisle once more, her footsteps felt slow and burdensome, each step a reminder of her turmoil. When she passed by his seat again, their eyes locked, and in that fleeting moment, she felt an unexpected wave of calm wash over her. For the first time, she realized that there was something far greater than her own struggles at play. It wasn't merely a seating mistake. The man's quiet strength, his remarkable ability to stay composed despite her blunder, had altered the dynamics of the entire flight. Lauren felt a wave of anxiety wash over her, not just the dread of a reprimand, but a deeper fear that the repercussions could reach far beyond her job. There was something about this man that hinted he was no ordinary passenger. He possessed a level of influence that sent shivers down her spine. As she turned to walk away, she caught sight of several passengers watching her, their gazes filled with a blend of curiosity and intrigue. Sympathy, the whispers had grown louder, swirling around her like a storm, but the words remained elusive. She fought to drown them out, yet the burden of the situation pressed down on her, heavier with each passing second. Something ominous was on the horizon, and Lauren felt the chilling truth. There was no escape. The man had waited, biding his time, and now she was beginning to grasp that his patience was not without intent. The uncertainty of what that intent could mean for her and the rest of the crew gnawed at her. As the flight dragged on, Lauren could no longer ignore the gnawing dread in her stomach. Every heartbeat felt like an eternity, stretching the moments into an unbearable silence. The discomfort she felt from her mistake only intensified as time passed. She stole another glance at the man still seated quietly in the economy section, his presence almost amplified by the mounting tension. He hadn't moved, hadn't uttered a single word, yet his calmness felt like a heavy weight pressing down on her, a constant reminder that something far more significant than a mere seating error was at play. Lauren's spiraling thoughts were abruptly interrupted when the intercom buzzed to life, and the captain's voice resonated throughout the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We sincerely hope you're enjoying your flight. We're right on schedule and will be beginning our descent shortly. Please make sure your seat belts are securely fastened and your trays are in the upright position." Lauren's hands trembled ever so slightly as she braced herself for the final preparations for landing. She fought against her anxiety, determined to stay focused. Around her, passengers began to ready themselves for the descent, some retrieving their belongings from the overhead bins, others adjusting their seats. Yet Lauren's mind remained trapped in a whirlwind of thoughts, fixated on one haunting question. Who was the man she couldn't forget? She couldn't shake the feeling that his unbothered calm was on the verge of turning the entire flight upside down. As she navigated through the cabin, her eyes fell on Claire once more, still nestled in first class. This time, the expression on Claire's face was strikingly different, more serious, more intense. When their gazes briefly locked, Lauren sensed that Claire was no longer a mere bystander. She had been watching closely. Claire, who typically avoided stirring the pot, held Lauren's gaze longer than usual. And in that moment, Lauren felt a weight in those eyes. Something profound, something unspoken. The realization that Lauren couldn't quite grasp Claire's presence in the first-class cabin had always brought her a sense of calm. But now that serenity was slipping away, replaced by an unsettling awareness that she was woven into this narrative in ways she had yet to comprehend. The flight attendants moved with purpose, hastening to complete their final task for landing. But Lauren felt an oppressive weight in the air around her. A nagging dread settled in her chest, whispering that the descent would not merely bring the plane to the ground, it would also unleash the truth, the heavy consequences of her mistake, crashing down upon her. And then, as if the universe had conspired to punctuate her anxiety, Lauren noticed. In that moment, she felt a chill run down her spine. The man stood there, unhurried and calm, yet every step he took was slow and deliberate, as if he were anticipating something monumental. He glided toward the front of the cabin, effortlessly bypassing the crew, who seemed to fade into the background. There was a quiet authority in his presence that enveloped the entire cabin, casting a spell of stillness. The other passengers held their breath, their eyes glued to him, each heartbeat echoing the collective tension in the air. It was as if everyone sensed that something significant was on the brink of unfolding. Lauren's heart pounded wildly as she observed him drawing closer to the front. Was he making his way to the cockpit? Was an announcement about to unfold? But as he neared the galley, a wave of unease washed over her, twisting her stomach into knots at the sight of the flight attendant, standing by the door, speaking urgently into the phone. The instant their eyes met, Lauren sensed an undeniable shift in the atmosphere. The man's calm demeanor, his quiet yet commanding presence, had ignited something profound. Whatever was about to transpire, Lauren understood in that moment, would alter the course of everything. As he approached the galley, her pulse raced uncontrollably, anticipation and dread intertwining within her. The quiet air of authority that enveloped him sent a shiver down her spine, leaving her in a state of unease. She couldn't shake the nagging sensation that the moment was drawing near, when she would finally grasp the true essence of who he was. The other passengers had fallen silent, their attention riveted on him, while even the flight attendants, once bustling about the cabin, had slowed their movements, their eyes discreetly tracking his every step. Lauren fought against the suffocating feeling of impending doom, but it clung to her like a heavy shroud, inescapable and oppressive. He paused just short of the galley, where his presence loomed large, held an electric tension that was almost palpable. Lauren's eyes flickered anxiously toward the phone in the attendant's hand, her heart racing. The conversation had been hushed, nearly drowned out, yet the weight of the moment pressed heavily upon her. Her fingers yearned to grasp the phone, to somehow step in and alter the course of events. But deep down, she understood that this was beyond her reach. The man, still composed, shifted his gaze to the galley attendant, who had been speaking softly on the phone. Without uttering a single word, the attendant extended the phone toward her, and the air crackled with unspoken possibilities. The attendant's face had turned ghostly pale, and a sharp pang of fear gripped Lauren's heart. The man's unsettling calmness sent shivers down her spine. He was neither rushing nor angry, and that only deepened her anxiety. She could feel the tension in the air, as his presence slowly unraveled the fragile calm of the entire crew. With a slight nod, he took the phone, and Lauren watched in a mix of dread and fascination as his fingers glided over the screen with eerie ease, typing something. Then, in an instant, he held the phone to his ear, his gaze fixed intently on the attendant, enveloping them all in a thick, suffocating silence. The cabin felt like it was closing in on them, a heavy silence wrapping around every passenger, as if they were all collectively holding their breath, anticipating the unfolding conversation. Lauren stood there completely still, her gaze fixed on the man who was waiting for a response from the other end of the line. He exuded an air of calmness, a patience that both intrigued and unnerved her. What was he going to say? Who was on the other end? Was it someone of significance? Perhaps a representative from the airline? Was he about to voice a complaint or escalate this tense situation? The uncertainty hung in the air like a thick fog, amplifying her curiosity and anxiety. Stole a glance at James, who had emerged in the galley, his expression a mask of unreadability as he took in the unfolding scene. Yet Lauren noticed the subtle narrowing of his eyes, a telltale sign of his dawning realization. He leaned in closer, his voice barely a whisper. "This isn't good," he murmured, his tone thick with concern. A chill ran through Lauren. You simply don't toy with someone who wields their power so effortlessly. Her stomach twisted in knots, the weight of her earlier worries now feeling like a mere shadow compared to the overwhelming gravity of the situation. She had underestimated the consequences of her mistake. Was merely a simple, unfortunate seating mix-up, yet it felt as if she had unwittingly crossed an invisible line. The man wasn't just another passenger. He was more than that. He held power, a presence that demanded attention and respect. The intercom crackled once more, but this time, it wasn't the captain's familiar voice. Instead, a calm, authoritative tone filled the cabin, resonating with a sense of urgency. "Ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate your choice to fly with us today. We acknowledge an issue regarding seating assignments, and rest assured it will be addressed. Immediately upon landing, we appreciate your patience." Lauren felt a chill run down her spine, as the calmness of the announcement only deepened her sense of dread. The voice was too calm, too measured. It wasn't the captain this time. It was someone with authority, someone higher up. The realization crashed over her like a tidal wave. The man had orchestrated this. He wasn't just a disgruntled passenger. He was someone with direct access to the airline's leadership. Lauren's knees felt weak as she stole a glance toward the front of the plane, where the man stood, a looming figure of menace. Still clutching the phone, the truth began to crystallize with each agonizing second that ticked by. Her mistake had not just stripped her of control. It had unleashed a cascade of consequences that far exceeded her wildest fears. Whatever lay ahead was now beyond her grasp. The intercom announcement cast a somber hush over the cabin, the words enveloping everyone like a suffocating fog. Passengers who moments ago had been casually gearing up for landing now sat up a little straighter, their curiosity ignited by the unsettling tone of the message. Lauren could sense the piercing gazes of the other flight attendants upon her, yet she found herself unable to meet their eyes. Her mind was a whirlwind of confusion and anxiety. The calm, authoritative voice on the intercom had been unnervingly precise, too controlled. It was far from a typical flight announcement. It felt more like a command, a directive from someone high up in the company. The man had made his move. As she cast a glance back at him, still standing near the galley, an overwhelming feeling of insignificance washed over her. He exuded an air of composure, unflustered and unhurried, his posture relaxed. Yet there was an undeniable quiet strength that seemed to loom over her. There was something in the way he carried himself that resonated deeply. He was not merely another passenger on this flight. No, he was someone with the extraordinary ability to change everything in a heartbeat. Lauren, fighting to maintain her composure, glanced back at James, who had also sensed the weight of the announcement. His expression was dark, and for the first time, Lauren noticed a flicker of true concern in his eyes. "You don't know who you've messed with," James whispered, his voice low yet piercing. "This is bigger than anything you've ever imagined." Lauren felt a lump form in her throat as the gravity of his words settled heavily within her. She had hastily judged him, relying on a fleeting instinct that he didn't belong in first class. Her thoughts spiraled as she replayed their earlier encounter, the way she had approached him, his unexpected reaction. Now clarity washed over her. He was not just another business traveler, but a man who held the power to transform everything with a single phone call. Finally, he lowered the phone from his ear, his gaze sweeping across the cabin one last time. For a fleeting moment, their eyes locked, and in that instant, everything shifted. In that moment, it felt as though he could see straight into her soul. There was no anger, no frustration, not even a hint of disappointment in his gaze. Yet the cold, calculating edge to his stare sent a shiver down Lauren's spine, making her heart race. With a slow, deliberate grace, he turned and strode toward the cockpit, the entire cabin holding its breath as he passed. The air was thick with the tension of the unknown, and his movements exuded a confidence that suggested he had already claimed victory, as if he had been orchestrating this moment from the very beginning. Lauren's mind was a whirlwind of confusion and disbelief. What did this mean? Why had he chosen this moment to act? And even more crucially, what would unfold next? The intercom had already declared that the situation would be dealt with upon landing, but Lauren understood all too well that this didn't guarantee a return to normalcy. She had crossed a line, and now she was on the brink of discovering just how profound the repercussions would be. As the man approached the cockpit, Lauren caught a fleeting glimpse of James, who now appeared to be fixated on the door, his expression heavy with resignation. "It's over for you," he whispered, his voice laced with a haunting finality. To himself rather than to Lauren, whatever unfolds now is beyond our control. Lauren felt the heavy burden of those words more than she cared to acknowledge. The instant she had moved that man from his seat, she had unknowingly triggered a series of events that spiraled far beyond her grasp. She was no longer merely a flight attendant fulfilling her duties. She had become a participant in a game she hadn't even recognized she was involved in. As the plane began its descent, Lauren understood that whatever awaited them upon landing would carry a far greater weight than a mere apology. Or confront the man's true identity, his power would soon be unveiled. And when it was, nothing would ever be the same again. As the plane descended, the tension in the cabin soared to an unbearable peak. Lauren's hands shook uncontrollably as she made the final preparations for landing. The usual buzz of passengers getting ready to disembark felt like a distant echo now. Every movement seemed robotic as she struggled to go through the motions. But all she could focus on was the man and the quiet storm that had been brewing ever since she made her fateful mistake. The crew's interactions had come to a standstill, as if the very air was holding its breath, waiting for something monumental to unfold. Passengers were fastening their seatbelts and gathering their belongings, but an unspoken energy crackled around them, a shared sense of anticipation that was almost palpable. Lauren felt an unsettling sensation deep within her, a nagging certainty that everything was on the brink of transformation. Her eyes kept darting toward the front of the plane, where the man had vanished behind the cockpit door. He had exuded calm and control, yet his presence had altered the entire atmosphere. Now all she could do was brace herself for the inevitable, the phone call he had promised. The tone of the announcement on the intercom was charged with urgency, signaling that this was no ordinary situation. It transcended a mere seating mix-up. Something monumental was unfolding, and Lauren found herself at the heart of it all. As the plane's wheels kissed the ground with a gentle thud, the reassuring sound of the landing gear locking into place jolted the cabin back to reality. The call for passengers to remain seated until the plane came to a complete stop echoed through the air, but Lauren could hardly focus on it. She heard it, but her heart was too heavy with dread, a weight building in her chest. The doors would soon swing open, and whatever lay beyond was a terrifying unknown, completely out of her control. Her heart raced, pounding fiercely, while her mind spiraled with thoughts of the man. What if he held a position of power within the airline? Someone whose influence could alter the course of her life. The crew's behavior, their sudden silence and tension, hinted at a looming reality far more significant than she had ever grasped. In that moment, she felt utterly out of place, more vulnerable than she had ever known. As the plane finally came to a halt at the gate, Lauren's heart raced. She noticed the flight attendants beginning their preparations for disembarkation, and she stood frozen in the aisle, her hands clenched tightly at her sides, overwhelmed by uncertainty about what to do next. As the first-class passengers started to exit, her eyes were drawn to the man once more, who lingered near the exit. He moved with a calm determination, not in a hurry, but with a sense of purpose. When their eyes met, his gaze was steady and unwavering. Then in a soft voice that felt like it was meant just for her, he said, "Thank you for your service, Lauren." His words were simple, yet they landed on her like a heavy stone, leaving her breathless and frozen in place. The calmness in his demeanor sent shivers down her spine. It was more than just gratitude. It felt like a dismissal. He acknowledged her presence, but it was clear he was ready to move on to something far greater than this fleeting moment. His gaze seemed to penetrate her very soul, as if he had known all along that she would falter, that this was all part of a grand design. Lauren struggled to muster a smile, her voice trapped in her throat. "Of course, I dot, dot, dot. I hope you have a nice day," she stammered, her words hanging in the air. devoid of warmth. The man offered a faint, almost ghostly smile, one that never touched his eyes before he turned away and walked out of the plane, vanishing into the terminal. Around Lauren, the crew began to relax, as if the storm had finally passed. But Lauren couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that everything was just beginning to unravel. Even after he had left the aircraft, she could still feel the echo of his presence. Her heart raced as she made her way to the galley, where James was waiting, the tension still thick in the air. He gave her a knowing look, his expression still serious. "It's done," he said softly. Lauren opened her mouth, desperate to say something, but the words caught in her throat. She longed to apologize, to explain that she hadn't known, that it wasn't her fault. Yet just as James had said earlier, she realized it didn't matter anymore. She had made her choice, and now she was confronting the consequences, whether she felt prepared or not. The man had left the plane, but his presence would linger in the air, a haunting reminder that sometimes the tiniest actions can lead to the most profound consequences. Lauren stood on the precipice of uncertainty, acutely aware that the unfolding events of this flight were already weaving a tapestry of the future, one that she could never have foreseen. The truth about the man's identity loomed just beyond her grasp, ready to unveil the magnitude of her misjudgment. As Lauren navigated the last moments of clearing the cabin, her body operated on autopilot, yet her mind spiraled in a tempest of anxiety and disbelief, each thought crashing like waves against the shore of her consciousness. The burden of her mistake pressed down on her shoulders, an unbearable weight that she couldn't seem to lift. The haunting images of the man's composed face, his piercing eyes, and the phone call that had irrevocably changed everything, replayed in her mind. As the last of the passengers disembarked, the crew began their cleanup, their voices low and filled with whispers about the strange tension that had enveloped the flight. James stood off to the side, his gaze fixed on Lauren with an intensity that made her heart race. She could feel his eyes boring into her, yet she couldn't summon the courage to meet his gaze. Deep down, she knew exactly what he was thinking, and it terrified her. The weight of realization hung in the air. She had misjudged him, allowing her assumptions to cloud her judgment, and now the consequences were crashing down around her. James finally shattered the silence, his voice steady, yet laden with an unsettling truth. "You know, Lauren, you really don't grasp who you're up against in this industry. People like him, they don't behave like ordinary passengers. They don't create chaos. They bide their time, ensuring you understand the gravity of your mistake when it's far too late to make amends." Lauren clenched her jaw, desperately trying to suppress the tumult of emotions swirling within her. She couldn't afford to break down. Not now. "I didn't know," she whispered as much to herself as to James. "I thought he was just another passenger trying to claim a seat he didn't deserve." James shook his head, his voice steady yet filled with an unsettling truth. "That's exactly it. People like him don't need to prove anything. They wield power and influence. You can't judge them by appearances." He wasn't angry or loud. He was patient, and that was what made it so dangerous. Lauren's eyes flicked toward the door where the man had just left, and the realization began to sink in, heavy and undeniable. She had encountered this kind of presence before. Those quiet, composed individuals who exuded authority without uttering a single word. But she had never realized he was one of them. She hadn't known he possessed the power to turn her world upside down with just a few carefully chosen phrases. She had mistakenly thought he was just another ordinary passenger, and now she was left to grapple with the consequences. As the last of the passengers made their way out, the crew began to ready the plane for its return flight. While the terminal hummed with the familiar rhythm of activity, passengers drifting about, the sounds of life swirling around her. The sound of luggage being pulled from overhead bins mixed with the constant hum of the airport. But for Lauren, everything felt disjointed. The world around her continued to whirl, yet she felt frozen, trapped under the heavy burden of her choices. Moments later, the door to the galley swung open, and the senior flight attendant, Karen, stepped inside. Her expression was calm, but Lauren could sense the intensity in her gaze. "Lauren," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "the captain needs to speak with you." Lauren's heart plummeted. She didn't need to ask why. Deep down, she already knew. Was approaching, and she had been yearning for this moment ever since the man had stepped off the plane. It was no longer just a reprimand for a minor mistake. It had transformed into something far more significant. It was about a realization that had eluded her until now. The man had ignited a chain reaction, and the airline was about to feel the weight of her decisions. As she made her way toward the captain's office, her mind raced with confusion. What could she possibly say? How could she articulate the whirlwind of events that had unfolded? She had adhered to the rules, hadn't she? Yet deep down, she knew that the rules were not the true problem. She had allowed her assumptions to cloud her judgment, and now she was on the brink of confronting the repercussions of that grave mistake. The captain's office door swung open, and Lauren stepped inside, her heart racing wildly in her chest. The captain was already seated behind his desk, his expression a mask of unreadable intensity. As the door clicked shut behind her, a shiver coursed through Lauren. This was it. Whatever unfolded next would irrevocably alter the course of her career. "Lauren," the captain began, his voice steady yet laced with authority, "we need to talk about the incident with the passenger in first." Class Rachel nodded, but her throat felt parched, a tightness gripping her. The captain's gaze remained unwavering as he continued. "We've received a report, a complaint from a very important individual. It seems that you made a serious misjudgment today." The words struck her like a physical blow, leaving her breathless. She opened her mouth to defend herself, but no sound emerged. The weight of reality crashed down upon her, the gravity of her actions settling in. She had no inkling of the man's true identity, yet someone else did, and now it was far too late to reverse her error. The captain paused, allowing the heavy silence to envelop them both, amplifying the tension in the air. Lauren, a wave of dread washed over her as she realized the weight of the situation. This wasn't merely about her actions. It was about the entire airline. She had been informed that the individual she had interacted with today was no ordinary passenger. He wielded significant influence within the company. Lauren's mind raced, struggling to grasp the implications of his status. He was not just a passenger, he was a force capable of reshaping everything, someone whose power reached far beyond her wildest imagination. Stunned, Lauren stood there, the captain's words echoing in her mind, each syllable heavy with consequence. It felt as though the very ground beneath her had crumbled away, leaving her in a dizzying freefall. Her mind raced, desperately trying to grasp the reality of the situation. She had sensed something was amiss with the man, but this revelation shattered her understanding. She was utterly blindsided, unaware that her misstep had spiraled into a nightmare far beyond her wildest fears. The captain's face remained impassive, yet his eyes betrayed a flicker of something deeper, perhaps concern, or even a trace of fear. "He is," the captain continued, his voice steady but burdened by the gravity of his words, "one of the major shareholders of the airline. A high-ranking executive with connections to the board of directors. His complaint has already ascended to the highest echelons of the company, and as you can imagine, this incident will not be brushed aside." Lauren's stomach plummeted as she absorbed his words. This man wasn't just any wealthy passenger. He was a figure of immense power, someone who could alter the course of events with a mere phone call. She had brought humiliation upon him, all for the sake of a pair of sneakers. The irony struck her like a bolt of lightning. How had she been so utterly blind? The captain leaned back in his chair, his gaze sharpening, a storm brewing in his eyes. "Do you? Lauren, you must truly grasp the weight of your actions. This isn't merely a matter of poor judgment. You've crossed a line that affects someone profoundly tied to the airline's leadership. Because of your choices, the company now stands on the brink of significant consequences, legal troubles, public outrage, and inevitable internal upheaval." Lauren opened her mouth, but no words emerged. What could she possibly say? How could she articulate that she had been blind to his true identity, that her decisions were driven by unfounded assumptions and biases she never acknowledged? She hadn't even realized she was holding onto the captain's voice until it sliced through her thoughts like a knife. "I'm afraid this means your position here is in jeopardy. We're not making any final decisions yet, but you'll need to prepare for an official review. HR will be handling the investigation, but I want you to be fully aware that things are going to change, and they won't change in your favor." The chilling weight of his words crashed down on Lauren like a ton of bricks, leaving her breathless. She had always taken pride in her abilities, pouring her heart and soul into her work, striving to reach this point where she was finally respected. A member of the flight crew, and in one reckless instant, she had put everything on the line. It was no longer just about her job. It was about her entire career, her hard-earned reputation, and how the world would perceive her. "Do you have any idea what happens next?" the captain inquired, his voice softening just a touch. He gazed at her, a blend of sympathy and disappointment etched on his face. "This will be reviewed at the highest levels, Lauren. You'll likely face suspension for now, and a formal inquiry will follow." Lauren swallowed hard, struggling to find her voice. "I didn't know," she whispered, her words barely escaping her lips. "I didn't know who he was. I thought he was just another passenger." The captain nodded, his expression unwavering. "That's the problem, Lauren. You made assumptions, and in this business, assumptions can be perilous. You've learned that lesson the hard way." Lauren's mind was engulfed in a fog, the captain's words reverberating hauntingly in her ears. She had never envisioned it would escalate to this point. All she had done was kindly ask a passenger to change seats. Yet now it felt as though the repercussions were spiraling wildly beyond her grasp, leaving her feeling utterly powerless to intervene. As the captain stood and made his way toward the door, he cast her one final piercing glance. "I need you to understand that this is serious. You may not have intended for any of this to unfold, but the truth is, it has, and the company will take action." Lauren nodded in a daze, her heart heavy, as she watched the captain walk away, leaving her in a suffocating silence. She was utterly alone now, and the gravity of what had just transpired crashed down on her like a tidal wave. This was far beyond a mere bad day at work. It was a catastrophic blunder that would haunt her for years to come, perhaps even for a lifetime. Tears threatened to spill from her eyes, but she held them back, too proud to let them fall. Every fiber of her being screamed to crumble, yet she stood resolute, knowing she had made her choices and now had to confront the fallout. The door to the captain's office clicked shut, and Lauren remained frozen for a moment, her gaze fixed on the empty room, feeling the weight of her reality settle around her like a shroud. She was engulfed in uncertainty, unsure of what the future held. Would she retain her job or be compelled to part ways with the airline she had devoted so many years to? One thing was painfully clear. Her life was on the brink of transformation, and it had nothing to do with the man's sneakers. The days that followed the flight morphed into a disorienting haze for Lauren. She found herself suspended from her duties, awaiting the outcome of an official investigation, a turn of events that had blindsided her. Yet it wasn't merely the suspension that pierced her heart. It was the deep-seated shame of realizing she had made a grave error in judgment, one that weighed heavily on her conscience, set off a cascade of events that spiraled beyond her grasp. She found herself trapped in an endless loop, replaying that fateful moment when she had calmly asked the man to move. The chilling way he had complied, coupled with the haunting gaze he cast her way, felt as if he had already foreseen the turmoil that would ensue. During her suspension, Lauren spent countless hours in her apartment, staring blankly at the ceiling, desperately trying to unravel the tangled web of her thoughts. She had believed she was simply doing her job, adhering to the rules, striving to uphold the airline's policies. Yet in her heart, she grappled with the weight of the assumptions she had made about the situation. The man's appearance had led her to make assumptions, treating him like just another casual passenger, never once imagining he could hold a power beyond her understanding. As the day dragged on, Lauren's mind spiraled with anxiety about the impending news. Each time her phone rang, her heart would leap into her throat. Would it be HR? Would they deliver the crushing blow that her career was finished? The uncertainty gnawed at her, a torment far worse than any punishment. It felt as if her entire future hung in the balance. Hanging by a thread, waiting to be severed, she had poured her heart and soul into reaching this point. But now, in an instant, It felt like everything was slipping through her fingers. As the investigation unfolded, Lauren started to catch whispers that sent shivers down her spine. The man whose identity had been shrouded in mystery was not merely an influential shareholder. He was, in fact, one of the hidden owners of the airline, a silent partner whose name was absent from any public-facing materials, yet whose grip on the company was immense. The realization struck her like a cold wave, leaving her breathless. Spine, she had no idea who she was dealing with that day, and that day had cost her more than she could have ever imagined. As the company's top executives and board members weighed in on the situation, Lauren felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. Every passing day felt like an eternity, filled with anxiety and uncertainty. She reflected on her career, her colleagues, and the choices that had led her to this moment. Doubt gnawed at her, but deep down she understood that whatever the outcome, she would emerge forever changed. Just as her nerves began to fray, she received a call that would alter the course of her life. Everything felt heavy as Lauren sat at the kitchen table, her phone vibrating relentlessly on the counter. She stared at it, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach, knowing that the moment of truth was approaching. Her heart raced, each second stretching out like an eternity, as if time itself was conspiring against her. Finally, with shaky fingers, she reached for the phone, her breath hitching as she swiped to answer. "Hello," she managed to whisper, her voice barely breaking through the tension. "Lauren, it's Karen from HR," came the reply, sending a chill down her spine. "We've come to a decision regarding your suspension." Lauren closed her eyes, bracing herself for what was to come. She had anticipated this moment would be drenched in fear, yet it felt almost surreal. After a thorough review of the situation, Karen continued, her voice steady but compassionate. "We've decided that while your actions were a mistake, there is no evidence of ill intent. The company recognizes that this was an unfortunate incident, and we understand that you acted based on what you knew at the time. The man in question, as you've learned, is indeed a significant stakeholder in the airline, and his complaint has been addressed. However, after considering the circumstances, the board has chosen not to terminate your employment." Lauren's breath caught in her throat. Was she truly hearing this right? Was she being granted a second chance? "You'll be reinstated to your position," Karen continued, her voice steady yet compassionate. "However, as part of the resolution, you'll need to complete a series of training sessions on company policy, customer service, and sensitivity awareness. We believe this will help prevent any future misunderstandings." Lauren could hardly process the words. She had braced herself for the worst, for the devastating end of her career. But now it felt as though she was being granted a precious second chance, a beautiful opportunity to learn and evolve from her past mistake. "Thank you," Lauren finally managed to say, her voice trembling with emotion. "I won't let you down." "We're confident you won't," Karen replied warmly. "Just remember, Lauren, in this industry, there's always more to the story than what meets the eye. Be careful not to judge too quickly in the future." As the call came to an end, Lauren sat there for a moment, absorbing the heavy weight of the news. It wasn't a flawless resolution, but it was a chance. A chance. In her quest to prove herself, to learn and to rebuild what she had almost lost, she reflected on the man with his calm and patient demeanor. This lesson would forever be etched in her heart. The story had begun with a mistake, a fleeting moment of poor judgment, but now Lauren found herself standing at the crossroads of opportunity, ready to transform it into something that could define her future. Uncertainty loomed over what the next chapter would hold, yet one truth resonated deeply within her. She would never allow herself to make that same mistake again. The story of Lauren and the man on the flight teaches us a profound lesson. We should not be quick to judge others based on their appearance. Lauren mistakenly assumed that the man in sneakers did not belong in first class, leading to serious consequences. This lesson emphasizes the importance of being careful, respectful, and avoiding prejudice in communication. In modern American society, where cultural and ethnic diversity is a feature, it is necessary to avoid judgments based on appearance or style. In the workplace, school, or community, treating people fairly and listening instead of imposing prejudice helps create an inclusive environment. For example, in the customer service industry, respecting every individual, regardless of their appearance, not only improves the customer experience, but also prevents unnecessary conflicts. Applying this lesson, we should practice humility, openness, and always check information before acting, thereby promoting fairness and mutual respect. The story of Lauren and the man on the flight teaches us a profound lesson. We should not be quick to judge others based on their appearance. Lauren mistakenly assumed that the man in sneakers did not belong in first class, leading to serious consequences. This lesson emphasizes the importance of being careful, respectful, and avoiding prejudice in communication. In today's American society, where cultural and ethnic diversity is a feature, avoiding judgment based on appearance is essential. In the workplace, school, or community, treating people fairly and listening instead of imposing prejudice helps build an inclusive environment. For example, in the customer service industry, respecting all individuals regardless of their appearance not only enhances the customer experience, but also prevents unnecessary conflicts. We need to practice humility, openness, and always check information before acting. This not only promotes fairness, but also fosters mutual respect, contributing to a more harmonious society.